Let no man say, yonder is hydrogen only, and yonder oxygen only. The divisions of the substances of his creations are not as man would make them. The Book of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 5. Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to Oahspepals. It's the show where two non-believers read through the Oahspe and try to be jerks about it. We are your humble sons of Jehovah. I'm Dave White, and as always, with me, the Sargis to my Sueys, Rob Brunskill. Rob, how are you today?
I'm doing all right.
Now, I know we said at the end of our last episode that we weren't going to do another one of these, but, well, we were lying. It turns out Rob did a little more than the assigned reading and wanted to discuss it, and I was happy to oblige. So today we're discussing the Voice of Man and the Book of Jehovah, which are the second and third books of the Oahspe, and an introduction to all the craziness that follows. If you're reading along at home, we're still using the versions in the light of Cosmon.
Well, I think it's important that we really start with the very first chapter that's presented, which goes through the 7 eras of mankind.
Oh, please. I didn't read this one, so this is all on you.
Oh, yeah. So the first era is basically summed up as monkeys. This is where God has created monkeys. The second era, because, we have to get to mankind, is basically summed up as evolution. Evolution happens so that monkeys become man.
That's interesting, given some of the things that happen later on.
Yes. So the third era is civilization. And in this case, it is the angels are teaching man how to live in cities. Which, to my mind, brought in the image of a big empty city, and there are just angels out there luring humans in. The way I try to lure in the stray cats that live in my backyard to try and domesticate them.
That sounds a little like Defending Your Life, too. The giant, empty, ultra-modern city where everyone goes when they die.
Yes. And the era after that is conflict, which introduced the beast, who strays mankind from the direction of Jehovah and his angels. Think not I am come to send peace on the earth? Who speaks a bit like Yoda. The fifth era is the discovery of meat. Man is deceived by the beast into eating meat.
Oh.
And thus loses all his psychic superpowers, which is, very Scott Pilgrim. Veganism gives you psychic superpowers. Era 6 introduces religion, or, all the false religions. 7 million Brahmins, 20 million Buddhists, 7 million Christians, 2 million Mohammedans. Apparently that's it. No Jews, no other religions.
I see here that their trade is killing man. I wonder what kind of trade school you go to for that.
Yes, it's then 1/6 of mankind's effort is devoted to war, while 1/3 is devoted to drunkenness.
Hey, here's to that. I'm drinking a unicorn fart right now, so...
That is a beer with glitter in it.
It's still delicious. I don't care if it's not real unicorn farts.
And then Era 7 is God basically telling humanity, get your shit together. Go ye down to earth once more to man, whom I created to inhabit the earth and enjoy it, and say ye to man, stop having so much fun. Stop it with the drinking and the burgers. And divides man into faithists, the chosen, people who follow Jehovah, and the Uzians, or destroyers, people who follow the beast.
That's a pretty good summary of everything.
And so we get now the purpose, the whole purpose of the Oahspe is to how to attain to hear the Creator's voice and see his heavens.
Well, that starts off in what's essentially the first real book, The Voice of Man, which is essentially a cri de coeur from the man of the modern world, confessing that it is not satisfying his needs, confessing his numerous faults, and supplicating Jehovah for guidance. It's basically John Blue Newbrow laying out everything he has a problem with, and is proposing to solve over the next 997 pages or so.
The one of the most interesting praises that I've ever heard to God is, Thou hast invented a limit to my understanding, whereby I am reminded of thee to call upon thy name. I perceive my own vanity, that whereas were knowledge mine, I should become less beholden to thee. In other words, you made me dumb so that I'd follow you, and thank you for doing that.
I don't know what I should think about that. Siri, what should I think about that? I like that man says that he is less than all of the beasts of the world, save in the power of destruction.
Yes, my failures are worse than any other living creature under the sun. I cannot build my house in perfection like a bird's. My ingenuity cannot fashion a spider's net. I mean, this is obviously somebody who's never seen a bird's nest and doesn't know about, fishing nets.
Yeah, those things look majestic from a distance, but when you look up close, they're crap. Nature sucks. Step up your game, animals.
And let me also say, this PDF that we're working from has obviously been run through automated OCR. Given the original text is supposed to have been created through automatic writing, it's perhaps then the OCR version may actually be what's closest to what was whispered in the author's ear. And so I'm going to point out that the OCR in that passage has the word jiving in place of living. So the phrase is, my failures are worse than any other jiving creature under the sun.
Wow. I really don't have a ton of notes on this chapter. I do want to call out Satan watched on verse 15. And they tripped up on tiptoe, elated by the honey of my words. O Jehovah, how have I not covered up my wickedness? How have I failed to make the flow of my brother's blood the relish of Satan? I believe the relish of Satan is Heinz hamburger relish.
Yeah.
It does not hold a candle to my mother-in-law's piccalilli.
Yeah. I mean, it is an interesting book to read, especially when you consider the context of when it was written. He mentions half of my offspring die in infancy, which in the 1880s mortality rate was 46% for birth. It excuses one of the other comments about how man cannot fly like a bird or go underwater like a fish.
Both things which, actually I would say underwater with the fish they managed during the Civil War.
Yeah.
Fly like a bird is only 20 years in the future.
Yeah. It is important, your mention of the Civil War there. This is somebody who also obviously has a lot of Civil War regret. There's the quote, I have said war was a necessary evil to prevent a too populous world. I've never heard overpopulation as an excuse for the American Civil War.
Or any war for that matter. Interestingly enough, though, you say that Newbrow himself did not fight in the Civil War. He was probably a little too old at the time, and he was an established dentist.
Yeah. And also, stubbornly, I persisted in not seeing the justice on the other side. Which, when you're talking about the Civil War, that's... Yeah. Ouch.
Interestingly enough, though his parents had moved to the north from the south to get away from slavery, Ballou himself was not pro-slavery, but did not have any kind words to say about abolitionists in the run-up to the Civil War.
And, the classic phrase, thou alone was sufficient in the olden time. The good old days were always better.
Why, back in the old days, we just had God, and it was wonderful. Let's see, there's some chapters here to capitalism in general and false gods, but in general, mostly, you can kind of get the sense that this book is about by listening to any old person at a senior center talk about the old days.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the Book of Jehovah.
Oh, yes.
Wherein is revealed the three great worlds, corpore, atmospheria, and etheria. As in all other Bibles, it is revealed that this world was created. So in this Bible, it is revealed how the Creator created it. As other Bibles have proclaimed heavens for the spirits of the dead, behold, this Bible revealeth where these heavens are, and the manner and glory and work that the spirits of the dead enjoy, whereby the wisdom, power, and love and glory of the Almighty are magnified for the understanding of man.
Yeah, that's a high bar that has been set right off the bat. We're going to find out how God created the world. We're going to find out where heaven is. We're going to find out what there is to do when you're dead.
I will spoil that right now and say it does not clear that bar.
It does it in about the way that, 5-minute crafts teach you how to do anything.
Yeah. How did God create the heavens and earth? He's God. That's pretty much the answer you're going to get.
Yes.
Now, underneath that subtitle, there is what looks like a bunch of hieroglyphics written by someone who has never seen hieroglyphics before and is only going by a crude description.
And going off of relatively modern symbols as well, in some cases.
This is not an illustration. This is actually part of the text. It's the Apologia. It is presented in panic writing, that universal language we talked about in the last episode.
Ah.
And it translates as, the universe is full, all things are members. Speech they have, bid them speak. The recorder of their words be thou. Such is panic language, the first language. What saith the bird, the beast, the stars, the sun? All, it is their soul speaking. The soul hear thou, and repeat it. The light leadeth thee to origin. We get the start of chapter 1, in which God declares himself to be God.
Yes. He basically just says, I am, and boom, he exists. Which got me thinking about you could have a superhero who's God-man, and, he gets into a situation where he desperately needs something, and he just declares, I am, and suddenly creates a whole pocket universe. And he guides everything in that pocket universe as, living God to a final outcome, and that universe dies, and at the end it pops out whatever he needs.
I will never think of the white event in the same way again. But this is not without precedent. Essentially, it's roughly the same sort of idea as the beginning of the Gospel of John. I did like the bit, I think you called this out, the bit where God creates man.
Yes, he creates man, and just basically the very first thing he tasks him with is naming everything. First of which is naming God himself.
That's a pretty big task for someone who's only 5 minutes old.
And it's like asking a newborn to name their parents. You get the not surprising result of Ewe!
Which is pronounced Jehovah, by the way.
Yes.
And written as what looks like a crosshairs with a leaf in the middle of it, like the Punisher was taking out a vendetta on trees.
Yes, the leaf assassin.
Yeah, this is basically the symbol of the faithist. It's kind of a Celtic cross with an acacia leaf impaled on it.
It's also the creator formerly known as Jehovah. Currently known as Jehovah, but God basically leaves the naming of everything up to man.
Man really fumbles the ball on a lot of this.
Yeah, so we get the corpore or physical world with corporeans as their inhabitants. We get S, the spiritual world, with Essians, spirits and angels, as their inhabitants. Made up 2 parts, Etheria, Atmospheria. And isn't it a good thing that God isn't still having us name things, or he might have been named Goddy McGodface?
I am surprised here, at one point when they are discussing the Etherian worlds, he mentions that they are created from a substance called Eve.
Yes, Eve, the most rarefied.
Yeah, and I am therefore surprised that the Atmospherian worlds are not made of a substance called Oahspe.
Yes, it does have 3 densities of material. There's the nebulae, the AG, and the GA. And at that point, God basically decides, you know what, man, you're done naming things. The last 2 names he gave me were AG and GA. We're done with you naming it. So when it comes time to name worlds that are part of Atmospheria, which God wants to be named comets, he tells man, you're going to name these comets.
We're done having you think for yourself. I want to back up a bit. At one point, he mentions the Etherian worlds are hollow and inhabitable and painted in colors that would just blow your mind, man.
Yeah, it sounded like it's sort of a clockwork reality.
Chapter 3, God explains how he created the entire solar system.
Yes. That he basically threw it in a blender.
Well, that's being a little disingenuous. He says vortexes, but it's basically the same. Though I will add that if you are looking for someone in the 1880s to explain how the solar system formed, this is actually a pretty good summary of what even a scientist would say.
Yeah, basically vortices which material is thrown into, and they kind of spun it around until a body was formed. Or I suppose you could kind of see it as like gravity sort of pulling things together. But these vortices continue to carry all bodies around in the heavens.
And some of them have rings, so
Yes.
that people will know they were made with vortexes.
Yes, God was showing off when he put rings on some of the planets.
In chapter 4, we get an explanation of how the realm of Atmospheria works by comparing it to the atmosphere.
Yeah.
If the previous chapter sounds like someone read a popular science article about the solar system and tried to turn it into cosmology, this basically reads like someone read an article about cloud formation and tried to turn it into a cosmology.
Yes, clouds are the sign of the unseen made visible.
There's also the assertion that when corporeal things disappear, they are becoming spiritual.
Yes, everything evaporates in time, moving from corporea to atmospheria, to S. Yeah, all corporeal things have a beginning and an end, while all invisible things are eternal.
Good to know.
And it was interesting to note, diet, desires, and behavior determine which heaven you get to go to.
Oh, I hope there's a Big Mac heaven.
Well, there's a natural progression of things that's described. You have a childhood in which something condenses from vortex and vapor into a molten globe. You have Genesis, in which you have Semu. That's when living creatures are brought forth. You have old age, or Hotu, which is past the age of begetting, or dotage. You have death, or also known as Edu, and that's when nothing can generate upon something. And then you eventually have dissolution, also known as Uz, in which something is spirited away into unseen realms.
This is actually one of the first appearances of Uz in the Oahspe, and confusingly here, it's sort of a general concept of things seen becoming things unseen.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see in the later books how that sort of applies as a concept, because it is sort of like the last society of man going from existing to not existing anymore.
Sure, though it is also confusing that within this own book, Uz will also be a place and a person.
Yes, that is definitely confusing.
Yes. Chapter 4, verse 19, he name-checks some extinct animals, just to show that he is, again, reading popular science. Chapter 5, Jehovah tells us how life came to be on the world.
Tell me, O my Creator, whence came life, this unseen within me that is conscious of being. Tell me how all the living came into life. Thereupon Jehovah caused the jellyfish and the green scum of the water to be permanently coming forth in all ages, that man might understand the age of Semu. When the earth and the shores by the water, and the waters also, were covered over with commingled atmosphere and corporeal substance, and this substance was called Semu, because by Jehovah's presence quickened he it into life. And I think I need a hot shower.
My Oahspe glossary just describes Semu as gelatin, which basically I just started thinking of it as god goo, which is probably not helpful either.
Yeah, I'm very glad that modern euphemism is birds and the bees and not the jellyfish and the pond scum. And it's interesting at this point that God says, each and every living thing created I knew upon the earth, of a kind each to itself, and not one living thing I created out of another. Specifically saying no evolution does not exist.
And he doubles down on it in the next verse. Let this be a sign upon the earth, that man in his darkness may not believe that one animal changeth and becometh another. Thereupon Jehovah gave permission for different animals to bring forth a new living animal, which should be unlike either its mother or father, but he caused the new product to be barren. Jehovah said, and this shall be testimony before all men, that I created each and all the living, after their own kind only.
Yes, so despite the whole second era in the very first chapter being about describing how, the original animals Jehovah created becoming the new ones, despite comments about the Drooks becoming made into men, evolution does not exist.
Chapters 6 through 8 are essentially God giving a Cliff's Notes summary of the historic books that are going to follow this in the Oahspe. Chapter 6, verse 1 is notable for the appearance of Uz, only now this time Uz is a person, the son of Jehovah, and not a concept.
And we get a reminder, out of Semu I made man, and man was but a tree, but dwelling in Hak, and I called him Asu, or Adam.
I also liked that at one point man asks God to explain heaven, and God's response is, I would explain it to you, but you really had to be there, man. He also goes off into a bit that he keeps all his stuff carefully sorted in bins from the container store. As a farmer soweth corn in one place, and wheat in another, and roots in another, and flax, everything in a separate place, even so doth Jehovah store the ingredients of which the worlds are made, everything in its place, the substance of the iron in one place, the substance of the stone in another, the substance of the vegetable kingdom in another, and even so of the substance of the animal kingdom, and the oils and sand, for he hath places in the firmament of heaven for all of them.
God is very neat and orderly.
He is an anal retentive god. There is also a time for Simu, and I don't know how the birds missed that one. It's also interesting because right here, God notes that he sent his angels to earth to live side by side with the first beings, the Asuans, but they interbred with the Asuans and created a new race called man, which he had just told us in the previous chapter was not possible.
Yes. Consistency!
I also have a note here at the very end of the chapter that God seems like a real quiverful type. Fruit of your seed I have quickened with my spirit, and man shall come forth with the birthright to my Etherian worlds. As I have quickened the seed of the firstborn, so will I quicken all seed to the end of the earth. Which is just, dragging God into the reproductive act, and that just seems a little icky.
Yeah.
There's already 2 people in this bed. Don't make room for Jesus.
Or maybe make room for Jehovah.
It's good to be the king. Chapter 7 establishes that every 3,000 years or so, God gives the dead the ability to speak to the living, which is basically what spiritualists were doing at around the time.
Yeah. We find out that the Earth and the Sun travel in its orbit, the circuit of which requireth of them 4,700,000 years, with, road signs every 3,000 years, letting you know, hey, God exists.
This is all done so people can learn the origins of the world. He also explains how various angels and gods are given supervisory roles over the affairs of Earth. It's not terribly interesting if you're not going to read the historical books, but it is an important part of how the book operates. God also forgives the angels for getting their bone on with the Asuans, because in doing so, they have made creatures capable of becoming angels themselves. And he commands them to rule over the mortals with virtue and lead them to virtue. My note here is that God loves delegating in this book.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because in every later book, he is a micromanager par excellence.
That he is.
Now, in this book, he's happy to let the angels run the show, but at the Book of Shalem, he is literally speaking to anyone and everyone every opportunity he gets.
Well, he may have realized that the angels kept getting it on with the humans. I don't know. There may have been a decision there. He's like, you know what? You guys need to back off.
And that's basically what Chapter 8 is, which is that he basically says the angels are going to screw things up. Which makes you wonder, if he already knows this, why did he put them in charge? It's the whole theodicy question.
Yeah, it's interesting that God apparently has a trust and compliance department. And in times of my harvest, a copy of these records shall be taken up to my Etherian kingdoms, and filed with my Orient chiefs and archangels in the roadway of the travel of the great serpent, for their deliberations as to the progress and management of the inhabitants of the earth and her heavens.
God loves red tape.
Yes, he does.
I do like that the humans and angels will make war with the foul gases of Atmospheria.
Yeah, and we find out the fate of any soldier who gets slain in war. They are basically damned to be in war for all eternity. Yeah,
some D&D right there.
Yeah, the mortals who shall be slain in war shall be born in spirit in chaos on the battlefield. In chaos shall such spirits enter the S-world, and they shall not know that they are dead, as to earth life, but shall keep fighting right and left.
And that pretty much brings the book to an end at this point. Is there anything I think I've missed?
Not really.
Oh, I think there's one important thing, which is that God establishes, at some point during this book, the first kingdom of heaven on earth, which is called Hored, because it is the place of the first organic abiding place for the first god of this world. This is only mildly interesting if you listen to our full episode about Shalem, because Camp Hored is where they started their planning for the commune. Thus endeth the inorganic habitation of the earth and her atmospheria. Which is also confusing because he kind of wavers between whether atmospheria is our actual atmosphere or some theoretical realm out past the material world.
Or just, basically just sort of everything that's not on the earth, the sky, the heavens, that's all atmospheria.
But also Earth has an atmosphere which we're going to still call the atmosphere.
Yes.
Any final thoughts?
No, not really. It is kind of crazy.
Oh.
I mean, definitely not consistent.
Well, you should read the historical books. They are buck wild. They're absolutely insane. If you listen to the main episode, I read a whole page out of one of them. and it is like reading some Stanley Comics stuff. It's not. It's just page after page after page of sheer gibberish. All right, now this time when I say we're not doing another one of these, I really mean it. Seriously, seriously. Cross my heart and hope to die. You will not see another one of these in your feed next week.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank Jehovah.
Yes. Praise be to Jehovah. Oahspepals was produced by David White and Rob Brunskill for the Ancient and Esoteric Order of the Jackalope and is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. All rights reserved. All wrongs reversed.